I know a man and a woman, we'll call them Adam and Eve, mainly because, well, I always wanted to do that, who have been fighting regularly about everything. Like, I mean it, everything. The time of day, name a subject. He can be difficult and selfish. That's a fact. I know him. But overall, her PCSD is the primary problem. It is not true that in every conflict or difficulty, the problem is 50-50. It's just not true. You got somebody who runs into the room with their hair on fire and other people are having difficulty putting it out, and the primary problem isn't the people having difficulty putting it out. It's the person with their hair on fire. That doesn't make her bad. It just makes her a genuine victim of pain. And her subsequent and understandable hypervigilance. You can look up the definition of that word, but hypervigilance is just being, your nervous system just being turned on and being constantly looking for sources of pain. Her hypervigilance and pain derail every conversation about kids, house, bedtime, money, everything. I listened to several of these arguments and finally identified a problem that they could hear. Because just telling somebody that they have PCSD isn't enough. No matter what the subject of the conversation, money, kids, house, meals, whatever, Eve would turn it into a conversation about her. In other words, she changed the subject. I think I've talked about this subject before, but I'm not positive. It's very common. You watch for it as you watch two people talk, and you'll see it happen in every conversation you watch. Somebody will bring up subject A, and the next person may wait no seconds at all before they change it into subject B. They just run off on a tangent just because, well, their tangent and the original subject shared a common word, like the. And it usually doesn't take very long. So, for example, he would bring up something that she was doing that was unproductive to the household, to the kids, to the whatever. She would change the subject to what? He was talking about something that was happening that was harmful. She changed the subject to her, how it was an attack of her. Everything became about how she was doing her best. Well, that's not helpful if there's still a problem. We have to elevate our best. I just assume that people are doing their best. Everything became about how she was feeling pressured, how she had made a decision, and he never supported, surprise, her. So the subject was always she or her. Solution. She said that she would quit changing the subject. I said, really? And what about when you don't identify that you've changed the subject? Because you've been doing this for a very long time. She said, you mean if I fail to identify what I did? I said, no. When you change the subject, because you will. She said, well, I don't know. And see, that's a problem. People will very often say, oh, I see the problem now. I changed the subject. I'll stop doing that. If you've been doing it all your life and not recognized that you've been doing it, which would include anger, for example. There are a great many people who become angry, who change the subject, who whatever. They finally recognize it, that they're doing it, but they've been doing it for so long, and they can come up with justifications so quickly, they can't identify when they do it. They can't. When we're afraid or angry, we're insane, and we don't think reasonably. So I suggested that she tell Adam the following. Exactly. I had to write it down so she could tell him. When I become difficult, or victim-y or angry or withdrawn, because she uses them all. Show me what the original subject was that we were talking about, and then show me how I changed the subject to me. Because see, when she changes the subject to her, she's always the victim. And then she becomes difficult, victim-y, angry, and withdrawn. She can't deal with all those things that she does, but she can hear, oh, I changed the subject to me. And if she can focus on the original subject, she can stay away from all the victimhood and all that other stuff, which is just a response to changing the subject. So she continues with him. Show me how I changed the subject to me, and then I will leave the conversation until I'm able to focus back on the original subject. So after the conversation with Eve, I got an email from Adam. He said, prior to your call, Eve and I were discussing a contractor's estimate that she had gotten to repair water damage to the roof. She became difficult, but I couldn't figure out why. She took offense to the fact that I raised red flags about the way the contractor did business. He made some unusual demands and was pushy in ways that most contractors are not, and I just brought that up. It was smart of you to raise the red flags. Red flags are much easier to deal with beforehand than after a job is done poorly. Much easier than an all-out dispute later when things fall apart. You've paid the contractor and the job isn't done. He continues. This is Adam. She defended the contractor by saying, Adam, you're wrong. Why would you say those things about him? She was attacking me, and I felt frustrated. I was angry. Okay, this is exactly when you need to tell her that she changed the subject. The subject was what? This is important because most people don't even know what the subject of the conversation is. Their mouths just move automatically because they've learned to move them all their lives. The subject was repairing the roof. That was the subject. And figuring out who would fix it. It didn't have to be that contractor. She changed it to you judging, guess who? Her choice of contractor. She heard you criticizing her choice. That's what she heard. So she changed the subject. And once she changed the subject to her from repairing the roof, there was no way in this world you were going to get that roof fixed. See? She has to be helped identifying how she changes the subject. Everybody who's listening, if you pay attention, you're going to see people change the subject in every conversation you're in, virtually. And if you don't identify that the subject has changed, you're doomed. Because you started with subject A, they changed the subject to them, and you keep talking about A. And they're talking about them. How are you going to have a conversation when the two of you are on two completely different pages? You can't. So we have to identify the change of subject. Somebody has to say, we'll get to your part, but first let's finish A. You can only do one subject at a time. Adam continues. Another time, she met this guy that she didn't even know while she was getting a pedicure, out of the blue. But when I criticized something he said, the guy at the pedicure shop, when he wasn't even there, she didn't like it. How did she make that about her? These are great questions, because when people change the subject, we often think, how in the world did we get here? How did we get from here to here? Until you figure that out, it's going to keep happening. So let me translate for you. I wasn't there, but here's what happened because I know her. She heard you tell her that she made a mistake talking with this guy while getting a pedicure because she met him and she talked to him. You would think, so what? He's a complete stranger. Big deal. No, because she met him. She chose to talk to him. he's now a part of her life. Her again. Notice the operative word. So she takes any judgment about him as being about, hang on, her. Again, it sounds insane, but it's true. She could attend a baseball game and be cheering for a particular team, and if you criticize that team, she would take it as a criticism of her. Why? Because it's her team. Everything in her life is her. Everything she likes, doesn't like, does, preferences, she takes it all personally. She's learned to do that from the time she was a little child. You continue. Do I explain to her how or why she changed the subject? You suggested that I tell her about changing the subject when she gets angry or upset, but sometimes she insists, I am not upset. But that's because she is completely detached from her emotions. All right, so first, whether she's detached or upset, she's still not connected. She thinks there's a difference, upset or detached. Either way, she's not having a conversation with you, is she? If she's upset, she's having a conversation about her, as opposed to the subject that you brought up. If she's detached, she's not having a conversation with anybody. Well, she's having a conversation in her head and just isn't admitting it. But she's still defending herself. That's the point. Doesn't matter whether she's detached or upset. Sometimes people say, I'm not angry. Well, they're not anything. They're just gone. And I've known people who do that, although almost every person who says I'm not angry is lying. So she's still defending herself, and it's harmful. She's defending herself by saying, I'm not upset, for example. She may be withdrawn, but she's still defending. She defends herself almost constantly. And only you can help her stop that by pointing it out. Why? I can't do it as effectively because you're there. Nobody else. I've had, and you both know this, I've gotten hundreds of emails from both of you. And if the two of you describe exactly the same event, I would have no idea that you're on the same planet because of the way that you perceive it. So it wouldn't matter how many times we tried to work this out. It has to be done live or she'll never see it. Now, she may never see it even live, but it's the only way she ever will. And you have to do it consistently. If she doesn't listen to what you're trying to point out, write down exactly what she said. And if necessary, we'll try to have a conversation with all three of us. But if you don't write it down, if you allow these things to go on, it's just going to get worse. Because every time you don't point out when she's changed the subject or she's being defensive, she takes that as evidence that she's not doing it. In fact, I've been present many times when a husband, a spouse, doesn't matter which one, says, well, my spouse did this the other day, and my spouse does this all the time. And the spouse who really does do it all the time, because I know the spouse, says, well, how could I be doing it all the time? This is the first time you brought it up. Well, yeah, of course it's the first time the spouse has brought it up. They've been too afraid before then. That's why you have to point it out every time, or they count it as they're doing it right when they're not. You continue. So my assignment now is to stop the conversation when she becomes difficult, point out that she's changed the subject to her, remind her that the subject is hiring a contractor for home repairs, and she walks away and gathers herself together or calls you or calls somebody or does something until she can talk about the original subject. Yes. And if she avoids returning, then you bring it up again. Because these crazy conversations simply cannot continue to happen. So days later, I get an email from Eve. She says, I've been practicing listening to Adam. He's pointing out when I change the subject, and I'm learning how often I do that. Stop my heart. Beautiful. Bless you. I didn't point all that out about you to be critical. It's just life-saving.